The Galactic Commerce Guild's flagship training facility on Kepler Station existed in that particular intersection of corporate ambition and institutional delusion, where the galaxy's future business leaders went to learn how to lose other people's money with confidence. The station's gleaming chrome corridors and holographic profit displays created an atmosphere of relentless commercialism that would have impressed even the most dedicated capitalists, assuming they could stomach the sight of 17 different species all trying to outcorporate each other in increasingly absurd ways. Senior Risk Assessor Vrextal Noom adjusted his ceremonial analysis carapace, because apparently even insectoid species felt the need to accessorize their business attire, and surveyed his workshop with the satisfaction of someone who had built an entire career on being wrong about important things. The Centaurian's compound eyes gleamed with a particular smugness that came from holding a senior position at the galaxy's most prestigious commercial institution, while his 6 arms manipulated various data tablets with a kind of multitasking efficiency that made other species envious and vaguely nauseated. Today's executive training workshop contained the usual collection of corporate climbers: a hegemony trade prince whose golden carapace indicated both royal blood and serious investment capital; several syndicate heirs whose neural implants probably contained more market data than most planets' entire economic databases; a collection of Federation commercial science who wore their families' trading empires like poorly fitted crowns; and scattered among them, various other beings whose parents had paid enormous sums for their children to learn the fine art of risk assessment and profit maximization. Today, colleagues, Senior Risk Assessor Noom began, his voice producing the kind of harmonic frequencies that Centaurians had evolved to project when explaining complex financial concepts to less intellectually gifted species. We examined perhaps the most instructive case study in our failed species investment analysis curriculum. He gestured with 2 of his 6 arms, and a 3-dimensional holographic display materialized above the conference table. Earth appeared in full commercial detail, rotating slowly while ominous red economic indicators scrolled beneath it in corporate standard font. Market status collapsed. Investment rating total loss. Commercial viability 0. The humans of Earth, Noom continued, his compound eyes reflecting the data streams with professional satisfaction, represent the ultimate cautionary tale about the dangers of investing in species with unstable market fundamentals. When this civilization first achieved interstellar commerce capability approximately 200 years ago, several major trading houses made significant capital investments in human commercial ventures. A few executives activated their market analysis software, though most seemed more interested in checking their personal portfolio performance than absorbing any actual knowledge. The hegemony trade prince was openly conducting what appeared to be a hostile takeover through his neural interface, while one of the syndicate heirs seemed to be shorting several major commodities markets. Unfortunately, the risk assessor continued, warming to his subject with the enthusiasm of someone who had never personally lost money on bad investment advice. The human's fundamental inability to maintain stable economic growth patterns made them unsuitable for long-term commercial partnerships. Their primitive concepts of labor rights and environmental protection created unacceptable regulatory overhead for serious business operations. The holographic display shifted to show what appeared to be official guild documentation, bankruptcy filings, colony abandonment reports, and risk assessment forms, declaring various human commercial ventures economically non-viable or unresponsive to market correction. The final human trading post ceased operations approximately 50 years ago. Noom announced with a kind of dramatic authority that suggested he'd practiced this presentation in front of mirror. Extensive market surveys of their former commercial territories have revealed nothing but abandoned infrastructure and defaulted loan agreements. The human species now exists only as a business school case study, a reminder that biological intelligence, without proper corporate governance, inevitably leads to market exit. He paused for effect, his carapace shifting to colors that conveyed deep financial wisdom. What lessons can we extract from this commercial disaster? First, that species survival requires submission to established market structures. Second, that individualistic business cultures cannot maintain profitability across interstellar distances. And third, that a hand rose from the middle of the conference room. Noom's harmonic voice faltered, as he noticed the raised appendage belonged to an executive he'd barely registered in his mental catalog of important offspring bipedal, mammalian, with that unremarkable combination of features that marked her as wait. The executive stood with the kind of unhurried professionalism that suggested she was perfectly comfortable commanding boardroom attention, which was unusual for someone whose family apparently hadn't paid enough for premium corporate networking access. She was roughly standard height for a bipedal species, with dark hair arranged in an efficient business style and those distinctive forward-facing eyes that seemed designed for analyzing quarterly reports. "Senior Risk Assessor Noom," she said, her voice carrying an accent that the universal translator couldn't quite place but rendered as something with Hispanic overtones. "If humans are completely extinct as a commercial entity, with no surviving business operations anywhere in the galaxy, and have been economically non-viable for 50 years. She paused, letting the question develop the kind of dramatic tension that would have made professional negotiators weep with admiration. "Then what am I?" The silence that followed had the quality of expensive stock options, suddenly discovering they were about to become worthless. Noom's compound eyes shifted focus rapidly between different visual spectrums, while his carapace patterns cycled through colors that had no direct translation, but generally conveyed the concept of market panic approaching critical levels. That is to say, the risk assessor began, his harmonic voice producing sounds that resembled a poorly tuned financial algorithm having a breakdown. Obviously, there were certain minor survivor operations. Negligible market share. Negligible market share of what? The executive asked, settling back into her chair with the air of someone just getting comfortable for a comprehensive quarterly review. Her tone remained perfectly professional while somehow managing to slice through corporate authority like a leveraged buyout through a family business. The other executives began to pay attention with the kind of sudden focus that usually preceded either a major merger or a spectacular bankruptcy. The hegemony trade prince actually paused his hostile takeover, while the syndicate heir's neural implants flickered with what might have been surprised interest in someone else's business model. Survivor businesses. Noom finally managed, grasping for professional credibility like someone drowning in red ink. Obviously, there were some marginal commercial operations, certainly not enough to constitute a viable market presence. How marginal? The executive asked with the patience of someone who had all day to watch a risk assessment crumble. "Because I'm the Regional Operations Director for Hispaniola Stellar Logistics, which maintains trade routes connecting 237 human commercial stations across 41 star systems." A few quick profit calculations ran through the conference room as various species applied their particular mathematical abilities to the problem. The results were uniformly catastrophic for Noom's analysis of human market extinction. Moreover, the executive continued with the relentless courtesy of a professional delivering devastating quarterly earnings. HSL is part of the Greater Caribbean Commercial Alliance, which includes approximately 800 active trading posts throughout 23 different star systems. We maintain active commercial relationships with 67 different species, including several represented in this very workshop. The hegemony trade prince's golden carapace somehow managed to shift to a deeper shade. "Wait," he said, his royal business education finally proving useful. "Didn't the Hegemony Commercial Bank just approve a massive shipping contract with something called Caribbean Interstellar Transport Solutions last quarter?" "You did indeed," the executive confirmed cheerfully. "My cousin Diego negotiated that deal. He mentioned that the Hegemony negotiating team was very impressed with our delivery efficiency ratings, though they seemed surprised when our logistics software was fully compatible with Hegemony commercial protocols." Noom's carapace patterns were now cycling through colors so rapidly that they created a strobing effect that several executives had to filter through their visual enhancement systems. But the guild's market intelligence clearly indicates the risk assessor began desperately. "Which market intelligence?" the executive interrupted with genuine business curiosity. The reports filed by the Colonial Investment Assessment Board, whose job was to determine which species were worth including in guild-regulated trading partnerships, or the analysis submitted by the Market Efficiency Council, whose budget allocations depended on demonstrating successful elimination of redundant commercial entities. The silence that followed had the gravitational pull of a major market correction, the kind that occurs when a large amount of institutional credibility suddenly collapses into a black hole of professional embarrassment. Because the executive continued, consulting what appeared to be a standard business tablet. If you're relying on reports from entities whose career advancement depended on streamlining galactic commerce by removing problematic species from official trading registries, you might want to consider potential conflicts of interest in your data sources. One of the syndicate heirs, her neural implants now glowing with what was definitely amusement, raised a cybernetic arm. Actually, she said, our family's investment portfolio includes substantial holdings in human freight companies operating in 15 different systems. They specialize in high-risk cargo transport through commercially unviable hyperspace routes. Oh yes, added a Federation commercial scion, human merchants operate most of the independent trading stations in the frontier markets. Something about being too stubborn to realize when a profit margin is impossible to maintain. Noom made a sound that his translator couldn't process, though it conveyed the general impression of someone watching their professional reputation evaporate faster than cryptocurrency in a bear market. I'm curious about your analysis of unstable market fundamentals, the human executive said, her tone remaining conversational while delivering what amounted to professional execution. Because while it's true that human commercial operations tend to minimize their interaction with guild regulatory oversight, our business networks have maintained remarkably stable profit margins. We've developed inter-colony trade agreements, risk-sharing partnerships, and dispute resolution mechanisms that have prevented any major commercial wars for the past century and a half. She paused to reference her tablet again. How many trade conflicts has the Guild Commercial Mediation Board resolved in that same time period? Everyone in the conference room knew the answer. Roughly 600, ranging from minor contract disputes to full-scale economic warfare that required military intervention. The Guild's inability to prevent commercial conflicts was a running joke among serious traders, though nobody was usually tactless enough to mention it during official training seminars. That's not a relevant comparison, Noom managed weakly. The Guild deals with far more complex commercial relationships. Of course, the executive agreed with devastating professionalism. I'm sure it's just coincidence that the extinct species has maintained profitable operations across 41 star systems, while the premier commercial institution in the galaxy spends most of its time mediating business disputes that turn into shooting wars. A Federation executive raised what appeared to be a tentacle. Now that I think about it, she said, didn't human arbitrators resolve that shipping rights dispute between the Crystalline Consortium and the Metallic Trading Alliance last year? And they mediated that resource extraction conflict in the Centauri commercial zone, added another executive. Something about having neutral market position, since they weren't officially part of guild regulatory structures. Wait, said the hegemony trade prince, his royal business education finally connecting some crucial data points. If humans aren't part of guild commercial structures, how do they maintain trading licenses? Because I've definitely seen human commercial representatives at hegemony business functions. The human executive's expression might generously be called a smile. We maintain commercial liaison offices in most major trading hubs, as independent contractors and specialized service providers. It's remarkable how much business you can conduct when you're not technically subject to guild regulatory requirements. Noom's carapace had stopped changing colors entirely and was now displaying a flat gray that indicated complete systemic market failure. His 6 arms hung motionless as he tried to process the total destruction of everything he thought he knew about galactic commercial demographics. But, he whispered, the profit projections. Calculated by whom? The executive asked gently. Because human commercial operations have a long-standing policy of not participating in guild profit-sharing schemes that we consider invasive or counterproductive to our business models. Most of our companies maintain their own financial records and share earnings data only with other human-operated businesses. So you just ignored the regulatory framework? Asked a syndicate heir, her neural implants flickering with what might have been professional admiration. We worked around it, the executive corrected. When the Market Efficiency Council declared that all commercial entities must register with the Central Trading Database or be classified as economically inactive, most human businesses simply chose not to register. We figured it was more cost-effective than complying with reporting requirements that included detailed breakdowns of everything from supply chain logistics to individual employee compensation packages. And nobody noticed the missing revenue? Asked the Federation executive. Oh, they noticed, the executive said cheerfully. But by then, several department heads had already received bonuses for successfully streamlining commercial registration processes and admitting that they'd accidentally classified a major interstellar trading network as economically extinct would have been career suicide. So the classification remained in the official records. The conference room had transcended silence and entered some new realm of quiet that economists would probably need to discover new mathematical principles to properly quantify. Executives, who had never thought about anything more challenging than their quarterly profit targets, were now staring at their risk assessor with expressions that ranged from confusion to comprehension to something that definitely qualified as professional second-hand embarrassment. I think, announced the hegemony trade prince with the slow deliberation of someone whose royal business education was finally proving useful, that perhaps our market analysis methodologies might need some updates. Just a slight recalibration, agreed one of the syndicate heirs. Might I suggest, the executive said with the kind of helpfulness that could cut through reinforced corporate bureaucracy, that future risk assessment training include modules on verifying commercial intelligence sources, or perhaps recognizing active market participants when you do business with them. I'd be happy to contribute to the curriculum development, particularly regarding independent trading network analysis. Noom's carapace had achieved a level of transparency that suggested complete structural market failure. His harmonic voice, when he finally managed to produce sounds, resembled the dying algorithms of a badly damaged trading system. Workshop concluded. He managed to whisper. Nobody moved. Workshop concluded, he repeated, this time with the desperate energy of someone who really needed everyone to leave so he could have his professional breakdown in privacy. The executives began filing out, chattering excitedly in their various languages about what they'd just witnessed. Several approached the human executive, whose name, it emerged, was Katarina Reyes, a perfectly ordinary name that would probably appear in next quarter's guild partnership directories without anyone questioning the commercial viability of her entire species. As the conference room emptied, Noom remained frozen. Behind his presentation podium, staring at the holographic display that still showed Earth with its ominous market status collapsed designation. With a gesture that conveyed utter professional defeat, he updated the display. The new text read, Market status, apparently thriving without guild oversight, thanks. 3 days later, the Galactic Commerce Guild quietly announced significant revisions to its risk assessment training programs. Senior Risk Assessor Noom was reassigned to managing the guild's archive of obsolete commercial regulations, a position that many felt represented either appropriate professional consequences or institutionalized cruelty, depending on one's perspective regarding corporate accountability. The failed Species Investment Analysis Workshop was renamed Contemporary Commercial Opportunities Assessment and was now co-taught by the former Senior Risk Assessor Noom and his new colleague, consulting market analyst Katarina Reyes, who had been fast-tracked through the Guild's executive certification process after demonstrating unprecedented expertise in independent trading network economics. On the first day of the revised workshop, Katarina looked out at a conference room packed beyond regulatory capacity. Word had spread throughout the station about the previous session's spectacular analytical collapse, and smiled with the satisfaction of someone who had just spent 3 days watching various commercial institutions quietly update their records to acknowledge the continued existence of roughly 24 million humans scattered across 68 systems, generating an estimated annual revenue of 847 billion standard credits. Today, she announced, we're going to discuss the importance of accurate market intelligence in commercial risk assessment. We'll begin with a case study of a trading network that was officially classified as economically extinct while simultaneously operating the largest independent shipping consortium in the outer commercial territories. In the back of the conference room, former senior risk assessor Noom took careful notes with all 6 of his arms. The irony wasn't lost on him that he was now learning about galactic commerce from someone whose business operations had contradicted his entire professional expertise, though he rather wished he'd discovered this gap in his market knowledge before being publicly humiliated by an executive whose species he'd declared commercially extinct. The galaxy, as it turned out, was a considerably more profitable place when you bothered to notice who was actually running successful businesses in it. Rather than relying on regulatory reports filed by beings with institutional incentives to make inconvenient trading networks disappear into administrative footnotes. Katarina's revised workshop curriculum became the Guild's most popular executive training program within 6 months, primarily because it was the only one that actually helped people make money instead of just talking about it.